Welcome back to the Breakfast Club. It was International Women's Day over the weekend, and over these last few days we've been highlighting women-centric stories. Today we are taking you to a very, very special one. These are the Sheroes Amongst Us, women heroes who we're calling heroes just because of how much they balance their everyday. So whether it is building businesses, whether it is working as employees in corporate organizations while being mothers, while being wives, sisters, this book highlights each of their stories. Joining us today is Falguni Desai. She's the author of the book. And if you open the book, you'll actually find that there are stories about different women. And one of the women we have with us here on the show is Preeti Vyas. So apart from Falguni, we're also joined by Preeti Vyas. She's the chairwoman and chief creative officer at Vyas Creative. So we have a Shero with us, and we even have the author behind this book. So let's just go over to them to understand a little bit more. Falguni, thank you for joining us. If we could just come to you, Falguni, to ask you first, what's the story of this book? Why did you decide that this is the need of the moment?
So from my childhood, I have been looking for stories which I can aspire to become. So I was always looking for female mentors. Yes, there have been mentors in my life in terms of my bosses and my dad as well. But I was always looking for somebody whom I can aspire to become. My mom is a teacher, and she retired by being a vice principal of the school. And I went into a professional life. When I entered the professional life, I was looking for some mentor who can tell me what the technology industry looked like, how a professional life I have to manage, and what are the nuances that a person should know when they get into a professional field. From that perspective, I was looking for mentors. And it has been a journey across the last 24 years that I have got few mentors on the way, a lot of them as well. But I think that is something that I owed back to the society. I wanted to give a list of mentors, a list of people whom today's generation or the next generation can reach out for any kind of advice or mentorship, and that is where this book was created from our side.
Okay, so Preeti, we'll just come to you in a second. I just want to ask Falguni one more question before we come to you, which is how did you decide, Falguni, which stories to include and which not to? Every woman is a hero in a sense, right? So how did you decide these are the stories that we should be highlighting?
So we looked at women from all walks of professional life. So like you look at it, Preeti is running her own business. We have got women who are from different walks of life. So we've got a psychotherapist. I have got somebody who is at the age of 55, started her own business. So we wanted to look at women from different walks of life, people who are supporting women startups in terms of giving them VC fundings. That's Richa Bansal. You look at Renusha, she's running a startup which is helping disability people to get jobs into the corporate world. From myself, I'm from technology. I've got a CIO which is from Mahindra. She's also on this book. So we've taken women from different walks of life, different professional professions of their lives, which will give a wholesome experience in that. So we were not restricted to one particular business or professional life. We looked at multiple professional lives, which the women would have walked through in their lives.
Okay, Preeti, if we could ask you, we know that you run an organization on your own, but your story is actually one that's had its own, if I may say, roller coaster. I was reading about your story. I was reading about, for example, a fire that burnt down your entire company, the entire store. The first day that you had someone coming in to assist you. The fact that you have for many years been your family's only bread earner. These are huge, huge tasks in themselves. Can I ask you almost to summarize your story for our audiences first, and then we'll come to you with more questions?
Sure. Well, I'm a branding designer. I was educated at the National Institute of Design. So I wasn't really thinking that I was going to be a businesswoman, that I was going to be an entrepreneur heading my own organization. Life just happened, And as, of course, I tumbled into the world of entrepreneurship, I realized that I had to focus on my passion. And I think that's really what's helped me, is that once I've stayed focused in the work that I do and enjoy the work that I do, then I somehow find a way to figure things out, even though I have gone through a tremendous amount of hardship. So, for example, when I did start my studio, the fire burned down everything. I lost everything, including every pen, pencil, everything. 4 years of work just went up in smoke, and those were the days of actually having physical portfolios. So I had absolutely nothing. I had to start from rock bottom. So I have had many such difficulties in terms of later on I had an organizational issues where people actually, you know, kind of demolished the organization from inside out through financial irregularities and all of that, whilst I was looking after my daughter who had a life-threatening disease. So I had to take the eye off the ball at that point in time. And so people took advantage of that. And my naivety and trustworthiness, I thought everybody's trustworthy, and so I was actually, hoping that people would sort of, rally around me, but that didn't happen. In fact, quite the reverse happened. And then in 2008, when we had the economic burnout in the world, I was pretty much just demolished. I had to again start, and then of course we had COVID. I'm just giving you the highlights, but yes, It's been very, very difficult relationships, being the sole breadwinner, looking after my child, my parent. All of that, of course, is not easy. So you're handling a lot of emotional stress. You have performance stress in terms of work and clients, and you can't let them down because that's the way you're brought up, and you have to run your organization very ethically. And as I said, I'm driven by passion in what I do, and I will not compromise that. And I think that's really been my strength. Of course, I've had my spiritual buttresses as well, in terms of I really follow the Bhagavad Gita very, very sort of avidly, and that has helped me. And I think that, through huge financial difficulties, huge emotional stress like relationship issues related to your child, which can really, any mother would know, that is perhaps the worst kind of stress to have, there have been times when I've really not known where my next meal is going to come from, because that's really how bad it's been. To constantly come out of it and fight alone, because I've not had a partner in the business or anything like that. I really literally had to just pull myself out alone. It required a lot of inner strength. I have never talked about this. I have been, of course, talking a lot about my work, and for decades now. But when when Falguni came up and said that, would you like to write a story, which is also from a personal perspective, I actually hesitated because I'm a little shy about these things. But here I am out in the open. Why? Because my friend Dr. Anjali Chhabria, she was a psychiatrist, and she was telling me that there's an epidemic of people who really, young kids who are really get so emotionally stressed, and they are copping out. There's a suicide epidemic, and that is something to really worry about. And I thought if my story could actually help somebody gain a resilience and strength and some inspiration, then I'm fine. I'll talk about all of this, even though it's not easy. It's not easy to talk about personal issues.
I wanna ask you, and Falguni, I'll come to you with this question. Preeti, thank you for sharing your story and just being so open about the more personal aspects around it. Falguni, I want to come to you to ask you, when you were speaking to each of these women, a common thread, was that present at all? And I ask you that because women, their inner monologue, their inner struggle with self-confidence, that's a topic that we touch on again and again, and what it takes women to build themselves up from the inside. I want to ask you, Falguni, what insight you found when you were talking to each of these women?
So each of these women have their own hardships. They have fought across the barriers that they had in their lives. So as we heard Preeti's story, there are stories which will tell you the amount of hardships that they've gone. They've got their supports in multiple forms, but they had to overcome a lot of struggle. They had to put in a lot of efforts to prove that this is what is there and this is what they can achieve in their lives. So I think the common thread was they were resilient in terms of fighting what was there in front of them. They wanted to overcome it and they wanted to prove themselves. I think that is the thing that I found common across all these women. They wanted to prove themselves. They were working hard towards it, and they have now today achieved it, and they are still thriving to make it better from what they are today. So that is a common thread and a common line which I found across all the stories.
Okay, let me just take what you've just said then and go back to Preeti. Preeti, you were talking a little bit about spiritual buttresses, and you were talking about the importance of the Bhagavad Gita. Along the same lines, if I could ask you, if you could almost speak to every woman across India today, if you could, and almost whisper words to them that would make them have more confidence in themselves. Because we say, sometimes when International Women's Day comes around, we say believe in yourself, but we don't tell anyone how, what that process actually looks like. What would your words be there?
Well, honestly, touching upon the spiritual aspect of my journey, that has given me the strength. And so therefore, I would say, that look for your own spiritual anchor. And Bhagavad Gita worked for me, and a lot of my studies, and I'm a serious student of the scriptures. That has worked for me, and I'm saying that something else might work for you, and whatever it is, something which is larger than yourself, something which is not just rooted within who you are and what you do, and therefore confine your being as just as a small individual, but when you actually invite the universe to come in and be your sort of guide, helper. And in fact, what I would say is that you're igniting a principle when you actually have an act of surrender to a higher force, that it encourages you to surrender, but it also, I feel personally, through my own personal experience, it inspires the universe to help you.
Wow.
And I think that has really, really been my strength. I have learned not to rely on people. I've really, people have been there, and the wonderful people have come to my help, but I tend to not do that, because I don't want to live with expectations, because it's not the right thing to do. People are not really committed to help you in your life. They're committed to do all sorts of other things, and they may or may not help you. So it's better to not just rely on your tiny little being, but on a larger sort of energy. So find an anchor which works for you, but stay rooted in that. Today we live in an age where people actually are rather dilettantish about it, and they stitch together a certain kind of a path that works for them, which is comfortable for them. I would say, take one thing, stay with it, put your sadhana into it, and then perhaps you can sort of expand and do other things. But that's really been my journey, so therefore I come from my perspective.
Yeah.
But I suppose each one has to find their own path, but do focus on that, something larger than who you are.